Hi, a very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the webinar on the new normal for taxation of online transactions, which is essentially the equalization levy on e-commerce in India, and that is popularly referred to as the digital tax. This webinar is being brought to you by the Center for Digital Economy Policy Research in association with Grant Thornton, with APNP Partners, and with Fifth Chrome from Netherlands. A quick background on the Center for Digital Economy Policy Research, which is an independent think tank that formulates positions and policies for the digital economy. We focus on promoting aspects of the Indian digital economy and to facilitate the creation of a larger manufacturing and services ecosystem based on non-discriminatory policies. CDEP's objective is to bring together the finest brains in academia and in the industry to help formulate draft policies on digital economy that will help economic growth and prosperity of India. We collaborate with thought leaders from across the world for the purpose of supporting and sensitizing the government of India in its various initiatives to make India a global digital industry hub. We support the digital industry in their ethical growth roadmap. So why are we discussing the digital tax today? The Finance Act that was passed on March 27, 2020, that was 2 months ago, expands the scope of the existing equalization levy to a 2% rate to be paid on the amount of consideration received or receivable by an e-commerce operator. More of what this means will be explained by the panelists that we have on today's webinar. So this equalization levy is in the form of a digital tax that follows a global glide path towards amending the international tax system so as to ensure that digitization in businesses that drive an income as a result of an economy's digitization are subject to appropriate taxation. This is evident as of March 2020, where half of the European OECD countries have already either announced or proposed or implemented such a tax. We will be covering some of these aspects later in the webinar today. It is therefore imperative for taxation professionals and for public policy professionals to understand the extent to which the proposed digital tax will impact their organizations. It is critical to understand if your organization is liable to pay a digital tax, what are the nuances of the digital tax, and will some entities be exempted from paying a digital tax? As you will hear from the tax experts and the legal experts, it is extremely complex to unravel what the digital tax will unleash on our existing businesses. And therefore, it's extremely important that we understand how the details of the proposed taxation is going to impact each of our own organizations. Our first panelist is Vikas Vasal. Vikas is a national leader of tax of Grant Thornton LLP and brings in an enormous amount of experience in taxation. He's clearly one of the foremost experts in taxation with over 25 years of experience across all aspects of tax in India and has spent considerable amount of time in US, especially focusing on the India-US corridor. Vikas is going to talk about the evolution of digital taxation, the roots in BEP, and the applicability of equalization levy. I'll invite Vikas to present now. Over to you, Vikas.
Thank you, Jajit. I will put up the screens now. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak on the subject of digital taxation or equalization levy. In fact, though the tax implications are relatively new in this area, however, the concept is not new, and it actually dates back to the time of dot-com boom and bust, when this concept gained some traction in terms of how to tax the transactions taking place through internet. In fact, in the earlier brick and mortar models, it was very easy to levy tax because of the physical presence of the producing unit, of the physical presence of the selling unit, as well as the physical presence of the customer unit. And generally, most of these were within the same geographical bounds. However, with the advent of internet and online transactions, this is no more the case. You could have a seller based out of, say, Finland, producer, say, out of Vietnam, whereas the buyer could be in India, and in between, the entire logistics chain could be managed by a company based out of Thailand or in Dubai. Therefore, it complicates the entire supply chain and hence the tax regime. This concept gained more traction post the global financial crisis of 2008, after which most of the governments actually struggled to garner more revenue resources in order to meet their larger macro socio-economic obligations. In fact, if we look at it, we can say that 2008 onwards was an era when many of the capitalist governments actually turned towards more socialist bent of mind because they had to support the masses. I'm reminded of the popular US movement of 1% versus 99%. So what it all led to was it forced the countries to come together, especially G20 and other countries, to brainstorm how to garner more resources. And one of the areas which they identified was how to tax the larger global corporations, wherein there was an apprehension that probably they are able to structure their operations in a manner that most part of their profits sit out of either the low tax or no tax jurisdictions. And it all led to the evolution of BEPS project, which is base erosion and profit shifting project. As an outcome of that, there were various things which came out, which included the compliance burden on the global corporates in the form of country by country reporting, etc. And another big fallout was in terms of taxation of the online transactions, e-commerce portals, or digital taxation. There were three broad concepts which emerged. First one was based on the significant economic presence. Now we are used to the concept of permanent establishment, which arises because either a foreign company has employees, agents, or other for example, branch office, or through a project office, or has, say, 50 employees working from a particular location, there could be a possibility of a physical presence being established over here. Now, in the global context, especially when we are on online platforms, it is possible that a foreign company may have zero physical presence, hence the concept of significant economic presence. Just to give you an example, say a UK-based music download company may have customers in India and Asia without having even a single employee, office, or agent based out of any of these countries. Therefore, countries like India said that we would like to introduce this kind of a concept wherein the foreign companies are deriving revenue from the large consumer base that we have in India. Second kind of taxation which was propagated was in context of withholding taxes. I think all of us on this call are very familiar with this concept in India, especially if we are salaried class, because before you get the money which hits in your bank account, the employer is obligated to withhold taxes and deposit. Similar concept was propagated in context of digital taxation, that the payer should withhold taxes and deposit. And third one, which is the most interesting one, is the equalization levy, which is the topic for us to discuss today, which is a form of a unilateral tax or levy levied in certain situations when certain conditions are satisfied. Now, there's a slight difference between levy and tax, and which we shall cover, and which has its own ramifications. Now, interestingly, this concept has been introduced not as part of the income tax, but as part of the Finance Act. And it has serious ramifications for the foreign e-commerce portals because you may not be eligible for certain kind of tax credits. And I will deal that with in detail. So it was left to the choice of individual countries based on their facts and circumstances, whether to adopt one, two, or all these measures in order to tax the online transactions, online portals, which did not have presence in their respective jurisdictions. In our context, basically India, and they were deriving revenues or income from the Indian jurisdiction, but not paying taxes or minimal taxes. So that was the underlying background of the digital taxation. Now, is it purely a tax concept? Of course, yes, it has serious tax implications because keeping in view that gradually the online transactions are increasing in size, volume, and value, this is definitely a tax and economics concept. But if we look at the way it has developed post 2008 global financial crisis, it has had many political ramifications as well. In fact, it divided the world into two parts. One, wherein these companies were based, part of the Western world, for example, US, UK, and others. And other part was mainly the developing or the underdeveloped world where the consumers were based. I think that is one distinction. Another distinction is it also equally divided the Western world, whether it was the US versus France or UK versus other countries. I think there was an equal divide depending on where the corporates were based and where the revenue authorities would have to forego some revenue with their counterparts in other jurisdictions. If it was purely a tax or economics concept, I wonder why President Donald Trump had to say that American wine is better than the French wine. Seriously, I think I will leave it for everyone to debate and decide on that. Now, how did this concept evolve in the Indian context? Formally as a levy, equalization levy through the Finance Act 2016. Before that, there were various discussions, debates, committees, etc., which were set up. But the formal introduction happened only in Finance Act 2016. And it was a very simple equalization levy which was introduced. The rate of tax was 6%. It was to be paid by the Indian for utilizing certain services from a non-resident. Now, which were the services? Broadly, two categories of services were introduced. One was in context of online advertisements, which was basically when people use these online facilities through certain platforms like Google, Facebook, etc. And another one was the provision for digital advertising space or similar online advertisement facilities. So broadly speaking, it was the advertisements and advertisement space. If an Indian business is utilizing the same, it was required to collect 6% of tax and pay to the government of India. Now, I would like to remind us that it was an Indian payer, that is an Indian company, which was required to collect and deposit with the Indian government. Now, there were certain exceptions made. First and foremost, the exception was that if it is for some personal purpose and not meant for business purpose, then it was kept outside the purview of the equalization levy. And then there was a threshold limit introduced of 1 lakh rupees. If the payment was below that in a financial year, again, it was outside the purview of the tax net. Similarly, if the non-resident had a permanent establishment, it's a tax concept, and this permanent establishment was paying taxes, then again, it was out of the tax net. Now, when this levy was introduced, there were a lot of apprehensions, doubts, and also anxiety. And the reasons were, first, we all knew that this is merely a teaser and the government is testing the waters, because in the earlier report based on which this levy was introduced, there were more than a dozen services which were prescribed. Therefore, we all knew that this is merely a trailer and the actual movie is yet to be released, and which we will see as we come along, that the scope will get widened over a period of time and this tax levy will become more complex. And that is exactly what happened when we reached this year's Finance Act, which was 2020. Suddenly, we saw a new levy coming into being, which was an expansion of the equalization levy. We can call it EL 2.0. Now, what happened was the government said that even in context of e-commerce supply or services made by any e-commerce operator, there will be a 2% tax levy. So earlier one was 6%, this one is at 2%. Now, what constitutes e-commerce supply or services? There are 4 limbs to that. First one in the fine print is online sale of goods owned by the e-commerce operator. Let's take an example of a foreign company making coronavirus masks, and it sells to the various global customers from its online website. That is a kind of an example of the first one. Second, online provision of services provided by e-commerce operator. Let's take a case of a research firm based out of, say, Norway, and it provides its research-based reports customized to your requirements through its online portals. Third one, which is very interesting, online sale of goods or provision of services or both through an e-commerce operator. Here, you as a foreign company may not sell directly through your own website or portal, but you use another portal or website to sell your products and services. So in our earlier examples, say the coronavirus mask supplier sells it through another portal. It could be Amazon, it could be other portals. So all the services will get covered. And last but not the least, any combination, a mix and match of these services will get covered. Now, what constitutes e-commerce operator? Now, this is again a very wide definition, which is bound to lead to a lot of issues, disputes, and litigation as we go along. E-commerce operator means a non-resident who owns or operates or manages digital or electronic facility or platform. Now, what constitutes actually an e-commerce operator in terms of each of these meaning, digital, electronic facility, etc.? I think there are a lot of doubts arising from this particular situation, and we will cover some of these in the practical issues which the industry is facing today. Now, interestingly, this levy of 2020, which has been introduced, it is at 2%, and it is to be collected or paid by the non-resident, unlike the earlier levy of 6%, which is to be paid by the Indian company. This levy of 2% is to be paid by the foreign company. Now, that is where the complications and the complexity starts. And now, when does the foreign company has to pay this 2% levy? When it is selling any goods or services to any person resident in India, means any Indian company, any Indian LLP, or any of the Indian businesses, through a internet portal using the protocol address based in India. Now, this internet protocol address located in India complicates the situation further. And it is not only when the foreign company is providing these services or selling the goods to an Indian resident, there are certain situations wherein even when a foreign company is providing these services or selling this space to an outside provider, that is to a foreign company itself, those situations could also get covered. Means a non-resident to non-resident transactions could also get covered. For example, sale of advertisement targeted at Indian customers. Now let's take a simple example of an online edition of Economist, or for that matter, let's say Wall Street Journal, wherein a foreign company is advertising or targeted at the Indian customers. There is a possibility of those kind of transactions getting covered. Similarly, sale of data collected from a person resident in India or through a person whose IP address is located in India. Let's take an example on that. Say there is a research firm, market research firm based out of Finland. It connects with an Indian firm which connects the market research on, say, Indian water reservoirs and Indian water levels. Now, based on the information and the data it collects, it is selling online to, say, other foreign companies which are interested in doing business in India. Now, a plain reading may suggest that even these kind of transactions could get covered and there could be certain implication. Now, how these will get implemented, how we will track these, and how the foreign companies will comply with the law of the land, it's yet to be seen. Interestingly, a lot of representations have been made to the government that the foreign companies are not geared up. Their accounting system and their online system are not geared up to track these kind of transactions. Therefore, they need more time unless the government decides to shelve it completely, which is unlikely, because there are other representations also being made that this levy should come into play. So there are two sides of the same coin. So here the interesting difference is A, the tax rate. Earlier one was 6%, this is 2%. Earlier one was on advertisement space. This is on sale and supply of goods and services on the normal e-commerce. Foreign 6% levy is to be collected by the foreign company, and there is a whole gamut of compliance requirements which are prescribed along with it. Now, in terms of the exceptions where it will not apply, first, if the foreign company, that is an e-commerce operator, has a permanent establishment in India. Second, if the earlier transaction is covered under 6% levy. Obviously 6% is better from the Indian revenue perspective, so they're giving a concession vis-a-vis the 2% levy. But there could be certain situations where there is an overlap between the two transactions, so you will have to comply with the 6%. And a threshold limit of about INR 2 crores is fixed for a financial year. If any foreign portal is or foreign operator is providing services or goods which do not exceed 2 crore rupees, then this levy will not come into play. Now, what are the issues being faced by the industry? Some very interesting and complicated issues have arisen because of this interplay of equalization levy and various other provisions under the tax statute. But before we get into that, first and foremost is a complication it adds to, and my co-panelist Arjun will cover in more detail as to what is the validity of these provisions wherein you are asking a foreign company based outside the jurisdiction of India to comply with the law of land in India. And there's a whole gamut of compliance requirements in terms of quarterly filings, other information, etc., to be provided. It basically adds a lot of compliance burden. And from the past experience, it is bound to lead to interpretation issues and disputes and litigation. In terms of what constitutes 2% levy, what constitutes 6% levy, to add to that complication, now there is an interplay between equalization levy as well as royalty and fee for technical services. And why do we say that? We basically, the issue over here is the way the definition of e-commerce services has been provided under the fine print of the tax statute, which is the Finance Act. Now, over here, the definition is wide enough to cover almost any and every kind of transactions, including download of softwares, usage of cloud services, and similar other facilities. Now, a dispute is likely to arise whether it will be equalization levy at the rate of 2% or 10%. And why this dispute will arise is because foreign company may insist that I am getting covered under the equalization levy, therefore I am going to comply with 2% tax law. Whereas the Indian party, being extra conservative based on its own experience vis-a-vis the Indian tax authorities, would say that since I am only withholding taxes, therefore I want to act conservative. I am taking a position that it is fee for technical services or royalty payments, and I will withhold tax at 10%. Therefore, this is one issue. Second, it is also possible that Indian party may withhold at 10%, whereas the jurisdictional authorities or the foreign company insist that no, you are a separate taxpayer, therefore we will levy the 2% levy on that and you need to comply with the same. Therefore, it could result into a very complicated situation. We hope that the government comes out with a clarification on this aspect, that where EL is applicable, withholding tax may not apply, but it has to be a very clear communication, otherwise the issues will continue to arise. And these are regular disputes which happen even today on the FTS and royalty issues, but this has got more complicated with the introduction of equalization levy. Another issue which looks more like an anomaly, but that is what the issue is today. Just like the equalization levy for foreign players, a domestic levy has been introduced effective Finance Act 2020, wherein 1% withholding tax has been introduced for e-commerce operator on payments made to resident e-commerce companies. For example, if any company is selling on, say, an Indian portal, then a 1% withholding tax comes into play. Now here, even though it is clarified that resident e-commerce participants, that is Indian firms, Indian parties uh, who are participating on a platform will get covered, whereas the wording used with e-commerce operator are not resident e-commerce operator. And it has been left as e-commerce operator, which invariably would cover resident and non-resident. As I mentioned, it looks more like an anomaly that needs to be corrected, but a strict interpretation today could lead to an issue where both equalization levy as well as the 1% TDS may apply. Not a very taxpayer friendly situation, but that is where we stand today. Hopefully some clarity will come in. Some other issues faced by the industry include in terms of what constitutes online sale, whether the sale has to be initiated and consummated only on an e-commerce platform, or a part of it could be through a telephone connection, or a part of it could be email. Or practically speaking, you may initiate a discussion over an email, have further discussions over telephone, and may conclude the sale through a very different mode, which could be a paper contract as well. Now, whether all those transactions get covered or it necessarily has to be on the online platform itself. Now, what constitutes a definition of online provision of services? Now, it could result into very interesting situations. For example, in case a person books a hotel room from the online website of the hotel, okay, and the hotel is to be utilized outside India. Now, what happens? Does this levy come into play? Now, what happens if you go to an Indian portal and book a hotel facility outside India? What will be the interplay over here? Whether 1% TDS, whether 2% equalization levy could also come into play when the Indian portal makes the payment. What happens when an Indian resident makes a booking on the global online portal for a hotel facility or any amusement park facility outside India? What happens in those kind of situations? So there will be an interplay of many withholding tax provisions as well as equalization levy provisions. Now, interestingly, when we started the discussion, I mentioned that this has not been introduced as part of the income tax statute per se. Now, what does that mean? It means that it is not part of the income tax law per se. Therefore, the benefit available under the double taxation avoidance agreements, that is the direct tax treaties, will not come into play unless those treaties get modified, which effectively means that if an equalization levy is charged, whether by an Indian resident at 6% or the foreign company pays at 2%, depending on whether it's an advertisement or it's an e-commerce platform, the challenge for the active jurisdiction. Therefore, by definition itself, equalization levy is meant to be an additional charge, and the foreign companies may not be able to claim credit for the same. Jajit, in the interest of time, I think I will stop here on the practical issues and hand it over back to you, and then we can come back to take few questions and cover some other practical issues.
Sure, that sounds fine. I think as usual, Vikas, you have done an excellent job of not only clearing the cobwebs, but also walking us through the intricacies of the issue at hand, which brings us to more questions. And therefore, I'll move to our next panelist, Arjun Sinha. Arjun Sinha is a co-founding partner of AP&P Partners and is a noted legal expert in the intersection of technology, financial services, transportation, logistics, media, and broadcasting. And that positions him in a very interesting situation where he sees things that we end up missing out. So he's going to cover the legal aspects of the equalization levy and the impact that it will have on your organizations. Arjun, can I request you to start your presentation?
Thanks, Jajit. Thank you for that warm introduction. Let me just share my presentation. Yeah. Great. The advantage of going after a tax expert like Vishal is I have to make very limited points. So while Vishal's talked about the sort of global context, I thought what we could also see is how digital taxations have evolved in India per se. And sort of the genesis starts with a broader definition of how to interpret royalty and fee for technical services in 1991. And the first indirect tax being brought in towards the end of the service tax era for online database access retrieval in 2001. As Vishal had mentioned, there was a global discussion under BEPS to figure out how would you attribute profit for multinational companies. And the first action plan, which recommended 3 solutions. In 2016, we came up with the Akhilesh Ranjan Committee, which tried to figure out how will an action plan like this be implemented in India. And here, they reviewed the various suggestions that were provided, and they concluded that equalization levy would be probably the most appropriate option. Now, what's interesting to note here is when they reviewed how an equalization levy should be implemented, they analyzed whether it should be implemented on the person providing the services, on intermediaries like payment gateway services or authorized dealer banks, or on the person receiving the services. Because they would be in India, it would be easier for them to make the payment before remitting any payments outside. And their view was that in such situations, it might be best to go at the person who's receiving the services and making the payment in the first place. Something that's changed in the 2020 understanding. The second recommendation that comes from the Akhilesh Ranjan Committee as well is that because this is a tax on global businesses, we need to have very clear consideration on when the levy will be imposed. And which is why they set out specific circumstances in which the 2016 equalization levy would be imposed. This again is slightly divergent from how the 2020 levy is imposed. And then obviously we have the 2016 levy that comes in largely in the framework recommended by the committee, which comes with a 6% levy on online advertisement services. In 2018, again, this one of the other recommendations of the BEPS plan, which was coming up with rules on understanding how significant economic presence would be implemented, are also it's notified as a part of the Finance Act. And we come up with thin capitalization rules, which basically look at how companies should be extracting profit out of their resident companies in India. What's interesting is that there was some sort of assumption that after this Finance Act, the SEPS would be notified, we would have some global clarity on how it would be implemented by 2020. The report was supposed to be finalized by 2020, and because that consensus is still yet to evolve fully, these rules haven't yet been implemented. And following this, to come up with how these rules would be implemented, there was a consultation paper by the CBDT on profit attribution. But this consultation process hasn't evolved into a specific set of rules yet. And what I will do is I'll just come to this slide probably right now, is what was the need to have the 2020 equalization levy? I think obviously one is to widen the tax base and collect more revenue. Second is to tackle this repatriation of funds and understanding Indian government has increasingly been more mindful and understanding of how global e-commerce companies work, and is of view that more profits should be coming back to the Indian soil. 3 is obviously create some sort of incentives or disincentives for companies to look at shifting their presence in India and investing more heavily in India, and by coming up with a sort of a tariff-like structure would also create this kind of an incentive. And 4 obviously is because this consensus hasn't evolved yet, in some sort to generate a sort of bargaining power and also to sort of force the issue coming up with this equalization levy. And as Vishal had correctly mentioned, now that it's come in place, it's unlikely that it may completely be go away. However, there are a couple of issues that the government will definitely need to sort of clarify. And the first set of issues that come in are on what kind of businesses may be impacted by it and how they would be impacted. So if we go back to the definition of the fact that it will be levied on 2% of the consideration received or receivable by supply or services made, provided, or facilitated by it. So there is, in this situation, there is no obligation for this operator to collect the revenues that are in question. Now, this creates a few concerns. If we are talking about pure play e-commerce companies which are offshore, this would then also cover, probably also cover a levy on, say, cash on delivery situations where the e-commerce operator or the entity that is facilitating the sale is not in control of the goods, neither is it in control of the cash. The second situation that it may also give a rise to is, say, in issues of refunds. Or when you do replacements. So you receive a good and you don't like it and you have a certain period to try it out and give it back. You then give this product back. However, during this period, the incidents to deduct the equalization levy may have occurred. And the customer then returns the good. So the framework on how this would be, what this would work intersect each other is also unclear. This third is, I think, because the language also says facilitated, there are a lot of situations that may get covered as a result of unintended consequences. So, for example, if there's an online platform that is facilitating a communication between two individuals, and the transaction is largely an offline transaction, but the communication on the transaction of the transaction is happening online. Would that also come in? And a lot of this lack of clarity comes in from the fact that usually legislation that comes in has an explanatory statement. You'll have a statement of claims, or you'll have a committee report like the Akhilesh Ranjan committee report in case of the 2016 levy that sort of sets out the framework on how and why this legislation is being implemented and in what situation will it be applicable. And that, I think, is needed to be provided, that kind of clarity and those kind of rules are needed to be provided so that practitioners can have a little bit more guidance to understand when it will apply. For example, this is a key problem that you will face if you're trying to calculate whether this levy is applicable only in situations like a B2C levy, where a platform or a service is interacting with the customer, or are these also applicable to back-end infrastructure? For example, cloud storage services. And I think these, whichever way the government goes in this, just providing greater clarity on this would be a little bit more helpful. I think one point here would be that it also mentions, as Vishal was saying, that mentions discussions on that you will do a tax incidence on sale of data. Now, whenever there is sale from one entity to other, and there is that is of data of Indian citizens, you may be able to claim nexus, although that nexus may get challenged in Indian courts. The question is how practically a lot of these businesses work is that maybe there is never any sale, but only an access or license given to this information. So if the intention of the government is any form of monetization of data is required to be covered, the language is very specific in the instance of capturing sales alone. I think the final issue here would be the kind of transactions that are covered and whether it would also cover radio and sort of other kind of any other forms of transactions that are happening through online networks other than just purely the internet. So in terms of challenges, I think what will definitely come by is a question on the extraterritorial nature of this levy, and the Akhilesh Ranjan committee, when it came up with the framework for equalization levies, also spoke about being careful about levying this on non-residents. Second is we have some judicial precedent that talks about there should be a sort of nexus between the tax and the host country, which is India in this case. Obviously, Article 245 clearly states that no taxation shall be unconstitutional purely on the grounds that it is of extraterritorial nature. However, it probably will be tested in Indian courts. The second is, how do you classify monies? And again, this was dealt with previously, whether in one instance, a lot of the revenue department has been forceful in classifying a lot of amounts received by foreign parties as fees for technical services. This happened in, for example, GoDaddy case in the Delhi ITAT recently. How would you now compute this as as an equalization levy? The other legal challenge that we would see, it is not dealt with here, but I'll be happy to talk about it, is that it exempts businesses that have a permanent establishment in India. However, we've also in 2018 had the Finance Act 2018 talk about businesses that have a significant economic presence will have some amount of sort of profit attribution in India. But the test for significant economic presence is one of a business connection with India. So it's a slightly lighter test. It talks about business connection. While those rules haven't been implemented yet, it may be useful to just for the government to clarify whether if you have an offshore company with a business connection in India and therefore covered by SEPS, would you also be then required to pay the equalization levy, or is the intention that if you're covered by SEPS, then the equalization levy doesn't apply to you? I would assume that's the intention, but that's again something that requires some amount of clarity. On business challenges, I think business models themselves need to significantly reevaluate how they track transactions that are happening with India, and because there might be a lot of transactions that are unintended and get covered. People use VPNs, people may use servers in India, and these may therefore have IP addresses, Indian IP addresses. So I think that is one issue that needs to be challenged, and sort of that's an internal business call. From the government side, a business challenge would be if you have a foreign tourist who's not an Indian resident or an Indian citizen coming to India, in that situation as well, to give clarity whether the equalization levy would apply. And in the current context, it would, because their IP address would in most cases be Indian. There are some legacy concerns with the equalization levy in 2020 that were there previously as well. Some of these Vishal had mentioned as well, is that you will not be able to collect double taxation benefits. You would not be able to claim credits in your host country. Now, because the consensus between countries globally hasn't evolved yet on how profit attribution should work, in the interim, you would assume a country would not give benefit to a company that is located in their jurisdiction, but is paying the 2% equalization levy when it comes to paying taxes in their jurisdiction. So this may be a challenge that a lot of companies that are structured offshore may face. And I think there's a need to chart a way forward. I think first there needs to be some clarity on the genesis and the intent behind this sort of this levy, on what are the purposes in which it is supposed to be levied in, the discussion between front-end and back-end services, the interplay between SEPS and the 2020 equalization levy. These are things that need to be either be given explanatory statements, guidance notes, or just rules that need to be framed. In the second is, maybe it needs to also evaluate whether what kind of business models are intended to be covered by this. For example, in a domestic context, you pay tax collection at source, or you do the tax reduction at source right now under 194, in specific situations. However, the equalization levy may apply to many situations that were not originally contemplated and discussed previously. So specific exemptions may need to be given on the kind of transactions that it will not apply to. Also, the government may need to evaluate how the lay of the land stands post-COVID, and especially the recent statements, recent speeches seem to indicate that there is a greater need or intention within government to facilitate India as sort of a center for manufacturing and center for export of services and goods. If that's the case, then would there be a need to sort of discuss some sort of exemption framework for goods or services that are provided from India on offshore platforms to the global market would also maybe is a discussion that we anticipate happening with the government going ahead. I think that's it for now from me, Jayjeet.
Great. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you, Arjun, for bringing in the clarity. And I think as expected, we understand that this particular legislation will actually lead to more legal issues, and there'll be more challenges that will come up in the court of law. And I think that's where we really need to bring our minds together so that there are less ambiguous areas, and we should work with the government to make sure that there are less ambiguous areas so that business does not get impacted while the purpose of the equalization levy is still served. With that, we come to the Q&A session. I'm just trying to figure out the technology. Yeah. I think we have almost run out of time, and we also have a very interesting closing remarks. So we'll spend about 5 minutes on Q&A on the questions that have come up. And if there are any further questions, we'll post them subsequently onto our website, and you can see the answers to those questions. With that, I'll take the first question and I'll pose it to Vikas. The first question is, what is the compliance in case of equalization levy 2.0, and who was the burden of compliance? Vikas, over to you.
Thanks, Jayjeet. Interesting question in terms of the compliances, which are the cause of concern. So a couple of points on that. There is a set prescribed format which has been given by the tax authorities for both the 6% levy as well as the 2% levy. In the first case, the compliance burden is on the Indian payer, Indian resident payer, which could be Indian company or a partnership firm. In the second case, which is a 2% levy, the compliance burden is on the e-commerce operator, which is a foreign company or the foreign operator. Again, there is a set prescribed criteria over there. There are 4 installments in which they have to deposit, etc., depending on the transactions. So first case, Indian resident. Second case, it is a foreign company.
Thank you. Thanks, Vikas. The next question is from Charita Bharti. What she's asking is, while I realize that it might be controversial, but was there no discussion around any sort of retrospective applicability of the provision? And Arjun, if you could just take that question.
I mean, I would always be sort of mindful again of putting in taxes retrospectively. I think the government has a sovereign right to tax anything that they want going ahead. But retrospective taxation sort of changes the expectation with which companies view or conduct their business in India. So I mean, obviously you can change whatever you want going ahead, but to change things how they stood and how you had taken advice and how you decided how life would work, and for that to be changed is something that legal system should probably avoid. Thank you.
Thanks, Arjun. Next question, I think it again falls from a taxation expert perspective. So over to you, Vikas. The question from Aditi is, how will this be enforced? Will the non-compliant websites be blocked?
I think time will tell in terms of the enforcement. Right now, only prescribed things are in terms of compliance. And in case of non-compliance, there is a prescribed interest, penalty, procedures, etc. Now, whether the government is actually going to block or not, I think it's still a long journey, because first of all, we have to see whether this particular levy actually gets postponed. And number 2, what kind of enforcements are done. Well, it's very easy to issue a notice, but how do you enforce it? And how do you actually block it over a period of time? I think blocking, to my mind, will be a very, very rare situation. It will be a legal fight which will continue unless it's a situation of a complete deadlock where a foreign party is saying, I am not complying at all, or I'm not responding. In those kind of extreme situations, the government may think of this kind of a extreme reaction, because the government also wants to encourage foreign companies to do business in India. So I don't think this kind of a line will be towed, barring very exceptional situations.
So a follow-on question that comes from Yogesh Mule to you, Vikas, is how the equalization levy at 2% would affect the market research industry?
Well, let me go back to the 6% levy. When the Indian residents were asked to collect and deposit, the idea was that probably if an Indian resident is making a payment of say $100, it would withhold 6 and pay 94 to the foreign party. What actually transpired was that foreign parties in many situations said that since you need these services and we know that there are not majorly alternatives available, so you give us full 100 and you pay 6. So there was a lot of hue and cry in terms of the uh, cost of doing business in India going up, especially for MSMEs. Now, coming to the equalization levy of 2%, yes, it is possible if this levy is applicable based on the instant case of research, which if it meets all the criteria being provided by a non-resident operator or a company through a non-resident operator, an Indian party is downloading that and there is a levy applicable, it is likely to increase the cost by 2%. We can say that cost of doing business goes up slightly.
Okay, one last question, and Arjun, I'll pose it to you. It's a little longish. It comes from Mohit Kalavatia. A major criticism of the 2016 levy was that businesses was the indirect nature of the levy and hence allowing non-resident companies to pass on the tax burden to Indian entities. Do you think same problem is likely to persist? In essence, increasing the cost of services for consumers. There's also a follow-on question is on the extraterritorial jurisdiction, how successful Indian enforcement authorities are likely to be in enforcing this levy on businesses on which they have got no jurisdiction.
Correct. So the first one I think has been sort of adequately answered by Vishal. I mean, because is that you will see a situation in which the cost may slightly go up if we have to extrapolate the 2016 experience. It might also incentivize a lot of companies to start looking at India, and if India is a significant business opportunity, then to re-establish presence. This, as for the second one, on the enforcement side, yes, this might have two problems. One is information. How will you be aware whether the equalization levy is being appropriately taken in all situations? The universe of e-commerce players out there is a very long tail, and many of them may be more easier with non-compliance, and therefore it might be an enforcement challenge. And the second is, even if you identify the non-compliance, it will be a slightly uphill task. Probably one easy way of solving this would be when we end up having some sort of a global commitment to sort of take profits and attribute it to countries validly, and then you can have a mutual sort of agreement in how these will be dealt with. Other than that, the prospect of basically sort of litigating each claim may be significantly cost intensive.
Right. Thank you. No, so clearly, Arjun, this is going to be a new uncharted territory because I don't think extraterritorial taxation has been well dealt with, and we all understand the implications, especially when it's from a developing economy to a developed economy.
Yes.
So we have had issues from extraterritorial jurisdictions coming from the developed to the developing, but not the other way around. So this will be very, very interesting.
I think interestingly, you might end up seeing the government thinking about some creative ways to either offset payments or find out ways in which consequences can be built in on non-compliance.
Right. I think it'll be interesting to watch that. And there was a question around that itself. So that's very interesting. Moving forward, before we come to the closing remarks and we run out of time, I would just like to thank the two people who are helping us in setting this webinar together and did all the heavy lifting. That's Rishabh Bhattacharya, who's a research lead, and Henam Singla, who's a young research assistant. So thank you, Rishabh and Henam, for making this webinar possible. With that, I'll move to the end of this session, which is the closing remarks and a very interesting perspective on the digital tax from a Europe-India corridor that Anirvan Sen is going to bring in. Anirvan is the CEO of Fifth Chrome BV and also is the founder of Roundtable Insights. He is an absolute authority on the Europe-India corridor with over 25 years of experience in post-M&A processes, growth strategy, and digital innovation. So we couldn't have had a better person to do the closing remarks. So over to you, Anirvan.
Thank you, Jajit. So I guess you will put on the screen. So for the attendees, just a quick perspective of what I wanted to bring in for this debate. So on your screen, you essentially see kind of the European landscape and how it has evolved. So what we find in Europe is while Europe was at the forefront of the digital taxation for the last few years, but it has also caused a bit of a rift between different economies in Europe. Unlike the economies of US or the economies of China and India, which are large economies, large spread, Europe on the other side is made up of different member states. Each one of them have small pockets and are dependent on different industries for their sustenance. And what we find is some of the larger countries which have large population are the ones that are supporting the digital tax. And on the other side, some of the countries that are based on digital economy, knowledge-centric economies, are kind of opposing it because it feels that it will shackle their ability to do business across the globe. Germany is wavering from its initial commitment due to the fact that it may raise the heckles between US and Europe, and it may lead to a bit of a cold war with respect to trade. So there are various ramifications that are taking place. And of course, some of the emerging economies in Eastern Europe, these are also based largely on services they provide either to Western Europe or to the rest of the world. And much of their services are being provided through digital platforms. And that is where it kind of also makes it difficult for them to be able to kind of lend their support to the digital space and the digital tax. So given all of this, we see a very interesting perspective, a sort of a diorama, a sort of a mini perspective of what's going to happen in the global economy as well. Because on one side, we will have countries which have large population or regions which have large population would be in favor of deploying and enforcing digital tax. On the other side, economies, smaller economies that are based on digital, let's say, platforms and digital transactions would be wary of bringing in this digital tax, or enforcing this digital tax. So that was what I had to share. But before I go, just a couple of perspectives based on what I saw and heard by the two experts that Arjun and Vikas, what they shared. One is, this is just a start. And I think we will see a lot more happen, especially a lot of iterations going back and forth on what's going to be the final outcome on the tax front. Second thing is, beyond just the tax and the accounting perspective, there is going to be ramification on cross-border and international business, political ramifications, but also economic ramifications. And that needs to be seen, especially a country like India, where India is trying to attract investments, that it is not too stuck up, too kind of rigid in its implementation and scare away foreign investors. The other thing is, as we get into the future, we're going to have a lot more businesses coming up on digital. It's a train that has left the station, and therefore more and more businesses are going to get onto digital. So which means we should be seeing a lot more happening on the digital tax front. Interestingly, there is also cryptocurrency, and the way some of the international transactions that are already taking place on the cryptocurrency. How would we think about managing those? So that's what's going to happen. But overall, what we are going to see is there is going to be a battle between digital economies and conventional economies. And who comes out and how the implementation is going to be done, how the enforcement is going to take place, and how the collection is going to take place, the jury is out. With that, I would like to close the session. Thank you all for attending it, and hope to interact with some of you. And if you have any questions, I will again relay back to Jayjeet for questions, information, or anything that you need. Jayjeet and the team will help. Thank you so much, Jayjeet.
Thank you, Anirvan, and thank you for joining us from Amsterdam. I really appreciate it. We have completely run out of time, and therefore there were many questions that were raised. We'll put them up on their website, and you will also find a recording of this video coming up on the CDEP YouTube channel, which will be put up in a day's time from now. So thank you all for being part of this session, and we enjoyed the session as much, I believe, as you all would have. and we'll keep you informed of any future sessions. Thank you and take care.